All right. So just odds and ends before I start. One is to remind you that the first midterm is next Monday. In class, 30 questions, multiple choice, same style and type of question as I've asked in the past, and you could find the old tests going back really about 10 years, I think, on the website. So I encourage you to look at the old questions, to take the old questions. I wish I had time and energy to give the video discussions of all the answers. My dream is to have not only answers to all the old exams, but discussions of why the right answer is right, the wrong answer is wrong. In reality, I have the priorities are complicated, and I can't get everything done. The other thing is that in the ideal world, I would have written all the questions on the Wiley Plus website myself. That's also not a realistic thing to have done, and therefore, a lot of these, you're noticing flaws in the questions. There are plenty of flaws in the questions, and maybe at some point I really will sit down and fix, edit them, rewrite them. If you see the flaws to some extent, that says I hope that you understand stuff well. It would be better if they simply had the right answer set. They were clear and straightforward. I hope my exam questions are a lot clearer. Just to tell you, with the exam questions, I make the right answer right and the wrong answer is wrong. That is, there's not a right answer, a best answer, and a not quite as good answer. The other three answers are just plain wrong on my exams, and that's, if I were to write homework questions, that's also the case. Any other things relating to homework? Actually, a number of people have asked me about how to find Orion if I don't assign it. If you go and you open the section that shows you the book, the online book, there is a tab labeled Orion, and if you click on that, it'll give you it'll lead you into the Orion questions for that chapter. You will still be asked to do this pre-assessment, which you can do if you want, or you can just jettison by pressing the red circle with the cross in it, the X in it, and quit and go on to the Orion questions. And I encourage you to do about 20 of the Orion questions. Hopefully they're more helpful than they're flawed. All right. If questions that involve a lot of calculation, you probably won't see those again on my exams. Anything else? All right. So on to material. On to material. Last time I talked about how balls bounce, and just to remind you and give you an opportunity to look back at those. If you want to ask me, last time was quiet. You got to get back in into asking questions. I want to remind you what we did and stop me if something comes to mind. So I looked at a ball bouncing off of a rigid, immovable surface. It's all about the ball. That is, the surface, by being rigid and immovable, the surface becomes so generic and so uninvolved in the bounce, except to help the ball do the bounce, that we don't care about its characteristics beyond that. The ball does everything. The ball, when it hits the surface, the ball begins to dent. That denting involves energy transfer into the body of the ball out of its kinetic energy. So the ball slows down, or at least it stops moving toward the surface as fast. It dents, maybe it stores energy, maybe not, and then it rebounds to some extent. And the extent to which it stores and returns the energy determines how well it rebounds. And some balls rebound beautifully, some balls rebound weakly, or not at all, dead balls. Yeah? So does the ball transfer energy and momentum into the wall, or just momentum? To a rigid and movable object, it transfers no energy because it can't do work on the object, right? The object won't move. So you can push on all you like, it won't go anywhere. But it does transfer momentum. So this is, it's a useful question, because there are often stories that are best interpreted through the movement of energy, and others that are best interpreted through the movement of momentum, and some where you want to pay attention to both. And the bouncing of a ball off an immovable surface, you can pay attention to both stories. Actually, they're both interesting, but they're separate stories. And so the ball is unable to transfer any energy to the wall. Why? Because it won't move. But the ball is able to transfer momentum to the wall, because all it has to do that is push for time. There's no requirements of movement. And the ball pushes long enough and hard enough when it bounces that it goes from having momentum down if it's into the floor or to your right if it's into the wall. It goes from that momentum to momentum the other direction, which involves a huge transfer of momentum, more than it had in the direction it started. So this is, I talked early on about the idea that if you go and bounce off something, so if I go run up against the wall and then come to a stop, I transfer all my momentum. It was rightward, now it's zero. But if I go and I hit the wall and I bounce, I actually transferred more momentum to the wall. I transferred more rightward momentum than I had, and I ended up with a deficit of rightward momentum, which, a negative amount of rightward momentum, which is a positive amount of leftward momentum. Is that good? Other questions? So that's the momentum story of a bounce is interesting, and independently, the energy story of a bounce is interesting. If I go in and run up against the wall, I'm busy bouncing off walls, right? And come to a stop, my coefficient of restitution in that bounce, or my energy ratio as well, they're both zero. I came in, the coefficient of restitution measures speed. The incoming speed to the outgoing speed. Well, there's no outgoing speed, so my coefficient of restitution was zero. Or the energy ratio is my kinetic energy coming in to my kinetic energy going out. Well, now there was some, but now there's no kinetic energy coming out. I hit and splatted. So that's the energy ratio 0. If I come off, if I bounce with some speed, I'd have both a non-zero coefficient of restitution and a non-zero energy ratio. Other questions? Okay, so that's off of a surface that's as simple as possible. Now let the surface dent. If the surface is able to dent, and its hardness or firmness or stiffness is comparable to that of the ball, they're both going to dent during the impact, because they push on each other equally hard in opposite directions. And if they're both of similar stiffness, can you sort of feel what stiffness of a ball is? You grab balls that are easy to squeeze and ones that are very, very hard to squeeze. So you should have this in your hands, what it feels like to have a stiff surface. If the surfaces are similar, they'll both dent. They'll both have work done on them during the impact and store energy. And the extent to which, how the energy is shared really depends on how far each one dents. If they dent exactly the same distance, they share the energy equally. If one dents 5 times as much as the other, the one that dented 5 times as much as the other gets 5 times as much of the impact energy, the collision energy, and is therefore much more interesting, much more involved in the bounce. Okay? So in this situation where the two have similar stiffnesses, how they share the energy is somewhat balanced, and both of the surfaces now, you care about their ability to store and return energy. So if one of them's terrible at storing and returning energy and the other is great at it, the one that's great at it is going to dominate the bounce if they get sort of equal doses of energy during the impact. And you can imagine all the variations on different surfaces like this. If one of the surfaces if the surface that is not the ball is dramatically softer than the ball, then that surface is going to get most of the energy during the collision, and it becomes responsible for the bounce. If it is a lively surface like a trampoline, great, the ball's going to bounce like crazy. No matter what kind of ball you have. It could be the world's deadest ball, it's still going to bounce. People, we're basically the world's deadest ball. It's terrible, okay? So we don't bounce off of hard objects, but we do bounce off trampolines nicely, because the trampoline gets all the collision energy and returns it beautifully. If the surface is a very dead, non-bouncy surface like sand, then things don't bounce off it very well at all. People don't, this is why it's hard to play or run or whatever in sand, dry sand. If it becomes wet sand, it hardens. It's much harder to dent wet sand than it is to dent dry sand. So running on wet sand is relatively easy. And so if you watch people running at the beach, they tend, it's human nature to try to avoid wasting energy. You can feel the energy coming out of you. You recognize it even if you aren't thinking about it. And you're running along in the soft, dry sand. This is tiring. And you see that nice smooth layer of wet sand, and you just tend to drift toward it because it doesn't dent as far. You don't do as much work on it. It doesn't suck as much energy out of you. I hope that's familiar to you guys. Beach volleyball would be very different if it was played on wet sand. It would be much easier to run around. It would hurt more to hit it when you fell over. Diving would not be as fun, if it's fun anyway. Okay, if the surface moves, that's yet another possibility. So things like bats or your leg or your arm if you're playing volleyball. When you hit a ball in that circumstance and it bounces off of you, now the bounce is still taking place, but you have to pay attention to the movements of both objects. And if the two objects are going toward each other, say your arm and the volleyball, the speed at which the volleyball is or the two objects are approaching one another is larger than the individual speeds. From the perspective of a bug on your hand, the ball is coming very fast. From the perspective of your hand, of the ball with your hand coming toward it, again, the ball is coming very fast. They approach quickly, they separate, therefore, proportionally faster. And since the ball bounces off of, in the case of hitting something forward, it bounces off of a forward-moving object. The ball comes in, approaches very rapidly to the moving hand, rebounds away from the hand, not so fast. It loses some of its speed. But because it's now moving away from an already outward-moving object, your hand, that ball is going very fast. From the perspective of someone who's just standing there watching it, the ball is the fastest thing in the room. Okay? Any questions about that? Right, the last thing I talked about then yesterday was the idea that objects typically aren't, you can think of the object as a single thing, or you can notice that really it's got some abilities to move within itself. For example, the baseball bat has the ability to flex. It's very stiff, but it does flex in the same kind of motion. Actually, it's got many motions, but the simplest motion it has within itself is this kind of flapping flexure, where the tip of the baseball bat and the handle go one way, and the middle of the bat goes down, goes the other way, and it flaps back and forth like that. And there are 2 points that stay put, and my fingers are on them. If I find the right spot and get it going. Where is it? Is it here somewhere? It actually matters where I hold it, and I'm not getting it. Oh, there it is. Okay. So this flapping motion, there are 2 spots that don't move, and those spots are special. They're called nodes. We'll encounter them again when we get to dealing with musical instruments. But not only do they not move, but whereas plucking this instrument at places that do move causes that motion to start, plucking this object at its nodes, the parts that don't move, don't start it moving. They're sort of dead spots in the motion. They're useless for causing or being involved in that motion. And so the baseball bat has its nodes. There are 2 of them. Only one of them is at the business end of the baseball bat. The other one's somewhere in the handle. But those two spots are special in that if the ball hits them, it doesn't cause the flapping motion to occur. Whereas hitting the baseball bat anywhere else will, to some extent, cause it to flap. And you can hear the flapping after the hit, and you can feel it in your hands if you're the person swinging the bat, because the thing vibrates, and it sucks energy out of the impact. Making this flapping motion involves energy, either in the form of kinetic energy when it's moving fast, or in the form of potential energy when it's highly bent. And so a baseball bat that is hit at places other than its two nodes, or vibrational nodes technically, wastes some energy. Some of the energy goes into the flapping of the bat, not into the ball, and doesn't go as far. And so what I ended up saying at the end of last hour was that when a ball is hit on the business end vibrational node, what's often called a sweet spot, when the ball hits that sweet spot, there's no buzz, there's no flapping motion, therefore no buzz, and you hear it as it's just this clean impact without a buzz afterwards. It was hard for me in class to imitate the full impact of a ball hitting the bat when the closing speed of the two, in real life, the two are approaching each other at 150 miles an hour or something like that, 100 plus miles an hour. They're going really fast. I wasn't really willing to swing that hard. But if you're willing to swing that hard and hit the bat, the buzz is pretty loud. So if you hit on the node rather than the sweet spot, rather than off the ends, for example, clean sound, the ball goes farther. And so just by habit, without even knowing anything about the science of what's going on, a person in the outfield expecting a long fly ball will step backwards expecting even longer fly ball when they hear the clean crack of a well-hit ball. They go together. That smack sound means the person hit the ball at the right spot on the bat. It's going to go well. Whereas if you hear this bzzz, or the bat breaks, it's not going to go very well. The bat breaking, the broken bats in baseball frequently are caused by hitting the ball in the middle. Hit it there, which is partway down the handle. And that really gets this vibrational motion going so fast and so hard that the bat comes apart, the wood breaks. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. They happen to coincide. Yeah. So the question is about the sweet spot that I have just discussed is what's called a vibrational node. Hitting it where my fingers are, this one or this one, does not cause the flapping motion. And so in a baseball bat, it's a sweet spot. You hear the clean crack and so on. There's a second sweet spot in any bat-like object, including a golf club, for example. And that second sweet spot is known as the center of percussion. And it involves a different sweet behavior of the bat, which I left out last time just for time. When you swing a bat, okay, this is my world's longest bat. Yeah. I don't even have to get in the batter's box. I can still strike out. When the ball hits this bat, so I do happen to have balls somewhere. Yay. So when the ball hits this bat, they come together. It transfers two interesting conserved quantities other than energy: momentum and angular momentum. The fact that it hits the bat at all and pushes on it with a force for time means it transfers momentum to the bat. So the bat is going, relative to its own center of mass, which is right here, the bat is going to slow down. It was heading toward the pitcher, and the ball hits it. Wherever it hits, the bat slows down. It has momentum away from the pitcher transferred to it by the impact. So far, so good? But the ball can also transfer angular momentum to the bat about its own natural pivot, its center of mass. If the ball hits here, it transfers angular momentum that way. If the ball hits here, it transfers angular momentum the other way. Okay, so there are two transfers that go on simultaneously. They're just two different conserved quantities that are transferred. And energy too, but we'll leave that out of the story. Well, from the perspective of the batter who's holding the handle over here, it would be nice if the handle goes smoothly forward without an abrupt jerk. No matter, in any case, that would be nice. It hurts to have the handle suddenly snap one way or the other during the impact. So in what situation would that happen? Well, the overall bat is going to slow down, which by itself will make the handle feel like it jerks away from the pitcher. Everything was moving forward very nicely, and suddenly it stops. You feel that in your hand, the slowing down of the bat, effectively accelerating that way. Is that okay? Wouldn't it be nice to compensate for that slowing effect by having the bat rotate by way of an angular impulse so that the handle moves toward the pitcher? So you can have the overall bat slows down, but the handle doesn't because of rotation in the bat. And you can get that if the ball hits out here somewhere. This simultaneously slows the overall bat, but also causes it to rotate so that the handle goes as it was before the impact. Questions about that idea? Did I get it okay? The point at which the ball should hit to cause perfect, smooth movement of the handle. That is, the bat overall slows down, but the handle doesn't. That impact point is called the center of percussion. And any bat-like sport is going to have one. In the baseball bat, the center of percussion happens to, maybe by design, maybe by accident, it pretty much coincides with the vibrational node. So when the ball hits that spot, it's double sweet. It's sweet because the bat doesn't vibrate. And it's sweet because the handle doesn't stop. Doesn't jerk one way or the other. Is that okay? In a golf club, because of how it's weighted, the center of percussion is in the head. You're hitting it at the right spot, so that you don't feel the golf club's handle suddenly jerk one way or the other when the head hits the ball, because that is the center of percussion right there. And I have to think about other sports equipment, but it's going to be like that. Is it for kicking a ball? It's probably, there's probably a center of percussion for when you kick a ball. If you kick it too far out to your toes or too up in your knee, you'll feel it in your hip. Do I have memorable experiences like this? I can't tell you, but you all can watch next time you kick a soccer ball, say too high, you hit it knee high or something like that. You should feel the top of your leg being sort of pushed backwards because you've missed the center of percussion. Okay? Any other questions about bouncing balls? Yeah. The coefficient of restitution and momentum when I bounced off the wall. So first of all, the coefficient of restitution is a characteristic of the bouncing object. And it's measured once and for all, in effect, by bouncing the object off a rigid, immovable object, one that doesn't get involved in the bounce, except to just facilitate it. So in principle, a person has a well-defined coefficient of restitution. But I can play with mine by pushing or not pushing with my springy arms. I can go, if I smack into a wall like this, I'm not going to bounce. But if I use my arms and play spring, I can change my coefficient of restitution. So let me show you a coefficient of restitution where I've designed myself to have a 0. So incoming speed is 100 units, and outgoing speed is 0. That's 0 units of speed divided by 100 units of speed. It's a 0 coefficient of restitution. Now let me design it so that my coefficient of restitution is 0.5. I come out at half the speed I go in. So I go in with 78 units, and I come back out with 39. I lost half of my speed. Is that okay? Other questions? Yeah. The coefficient of restitution, as far as I know, when it's used in sporting equipment, for example, it assumes that it's just about the object being tested, the ball, for example. And to make it the focus entirely on the ball, they use a surface that doesn't move and that is so much harder than the ball that its coefficient of restitution, which it may well have, doesn't matter, because it gets none of the collision energy. It has no responsibility for that energy then, because there isn't any. Is that okay? Well, if you do coefficient of restitution where you involve both surfaces, now you're specializing to both surfaces, and that typically isn't something that, well, it's a much more complicated story, and it's sort of outside of. It's for the experts, but not necessarily the science experts so much as the sports experts, that we want this particular thing to happen. Other questions? Okay. So with that, then, I'm going to go on to carousels and roller coasters. And the story here really is about acceleration, which we've done before, but acceleration of you, which is a different issue because you can feel acceleration. And so this is, to some extent, about your experience rather than physics itself. So first question to start off with. So you're a passenger in a car that's turning to the left, and you find yourself thrown against the door on your right. So this is surely a familiar sort of situation. You may not go against the door. There's something on your right that you're pressed against. And the question is there a force pushing you toward the door? You okay with the question? How many think yes, there's a force pushing you toward the door? How many think no, there's no force pushing you toward the door? It is the second. There's no force pushing you toward the door. And one way to check that sort of thing is if there is a force pushing you toward the door, something is exerting that force. And you ought to be able to identify what the something is, because forces exist between two objects. Object A pushes on object B, and object B pushes back. What object will be pushing you toward the door? The air, the car, well, it better be touching you. On the left side, it's not touching. There's nothing there. There's nothing to push you against the door. So that's one test for it. So if there's no force pushing you against the door, why are you pressing up against the right-hand door? Inertia. I'm hearing the inertia. It's inertia. Your body is trying to go straight and do what it was doing. And the car is trying to leave you behind by turning left. And so as you drift, so here we are, turn left, you're over here, and you're trying to go straight while the car is trying to go over there. And the right-hand door comes up and hits you. A little violent, okay, sorry. It pushes you to the left, not because you have a force pushing you to the right, but because you have no other force pushing you to the left. Your head would want to go inertial, straight and true. And the door says, no, you're going to go left with the rest of us. And it pushes on you. Is that okay? I'll try to control my impulses here. So some observations about roller coasters and carousels. You can feel your motion with your eyes closed. So hopefully you've all ridden these various, travel in a car or as a passenger in any vehicle that can turn or speed up and slow down. They all count. And you know from, I hope, memory of the experiences that with your eyes closed, you can feel your motion. But not everything about your motion, certain things about your motion. In things particularly like roller coasters, you can feel pulled in a gravity-like way in strange directions, not including down. You sometimes feel weightless. And this is true not only in roller coasters, but driving around in a car over bumps and stuff like that. There are moments where you suddenly feel, whoa, that was exciting. And on roller coasters, hopefully not in cars, you can become inverted without feeling it. If you do that in cars, tell me about it after the fact. All right. So the questions that I'll pursue are basically have to do with the feeling of motion and then putting it in various contexts. So I'm going to start off with that first one, which is what aspects of motion do you feel? And the answer is simple and straightforward. You feel accelerations, but you don't feel velocity. So if you think back to last time you were traveling as a passenger in some vehicle that was traveling straight most of the time, like a subway car or a bus or a train or something, and if you close your eyes, you can't necessarily tell you're moving, apart from the vibrations of things. If the vehicle is traveling at constant velocity, you can't tell that you're moving at all. After, you wake up and your eyes are still closed and are we stopped or are we moving? You can't tell just by feeling. I hope you've also tried that when you're heading forward and you know it, you open your eyes and, oh, we're heading forward. You close your eyes and you try to convince yourself you're moving backward or vice versa. You ever done this? I mean, you can do it because you can't feel the difference between moving forward and moving backward at constant velocity. There's no sensation that would give away which direction you're traveling. As long as there's no wind, there's only these vibrations associated with the imperfect car's motion. But forward, backward, you can't tell the difference. Furthermore, physics instruments couldn't tell the difference either. It's not like your problem, like you've got inferior senses. There's nothing to give away which way you're traveling. What you can feel, though, is acceleration. So if the vehicle you're traveling in accelerates towards your left, you're going to feel it. And what you're feeling is your own inertia trying not to accelerate with the vehicle. So let me I'll give you some words, some names for things before I continue. There is your true weight, which is the force that gravity exerts on you, and I'll show you that in a moment, that you can feel your weight, and I'll tell you how you feel it. There is also a feeling you get when you accelerate, which I call feeling of acceleration, just to give it a self-descriptive title. The experience you have when you accelerate, I call that feeling of acceleration. And because you feel your weight and you feel accelerations, those two experiences together give you an experience I call your apparent weight. This is the sum thing that you feel, the overall thing that you feel, that you identify as weight in a context in which you are accelerating. So here's the story about feeling your weight. If you're just, as most of you are, sitting there essentially at equilibrium, meaning experiencing zero net force and therefore not accelerating. When you're just sitting there, you feel heavy, more or less. And what you're really feeling is the stresses inside your body that come about from the need to support all the body above you. Each part of your body is supporting all the weight of the stuff above it. So, for example, my neck is supporting my head. I feel in my neck a compression, a stress in there that I associate with the weight of my head. And shoulders supporting neck, and torso supporting shoulders, and all the way down to the chair supporting my behind. Okay? So that whole stacked arrangement of stresses is what feels like weight to us. Is that okay? If gravity disappeared completely, your head wouldn't need any support. If it were here motionless and staying motionless with no weight around, the net force on it would be zero. There'd be no forces on it. My neck wouldn't be pushing on my head anymore. My head would just be there because of inertia. Similarly, my neck would be there because of inertia, and so on. I would feel none of these stresses. And when that happens, and it does happen to you guys, you have this visceral animal response, which is, oh my gosh, I'm falling. Weight's gone, I'm falling. And you're not worried about the fall, you're worried about what happens after the fall, the impact, which you want to be long in duration, short and small in force, right? Okay, so that's the experience of weight. How about the feeling of acceleration? Well, if I'm back in the chair now, but this is a chair in a Ferrari, and I hit the accelerator pedal. And suddenly the car is accelerating forward rapidly. And to keep me in the car, the chair back begins to push on the back of my back to make me accelerate with the Ferrari. Well, all the parts in front of my back need to be pushed forward as well. So my back pushes on my mid something, my mid something pushes on my front, the headrest pushes on the back of my head, which pushes on the middle of my head, which pushes on my forehead. We're all these things are, again, it's a stack of parts, each one pushing all the ones in front of it forward. And you feel these stresses through your body as a feeling of weight, but coming from the wrong direction. It feels the same as weight. It's just like you're lying on your back and having gravity do it. But in this case, it's not gravity at all. It's rather your own inertia trying to keep you in place while the back of the car seat is pushing you forward, bit by bit by bit. You're okay with the similarity between the situations? When you're supported against the force of gravity, the stack works its way vertically upward. Feet supporting ankles, supporting lower legs, knees, and so on, all the way up to the top. In the case of accelerating to the right, the stack goes from your back to your middle and so on. It works its way all the way forward. But it's still there, this whole stack of compressive stresses. And you feel that as though, gee, isn't there a small planet out there pulling on me with gravity? It feels like that's gravity. And actually, when you are accelerating forward in the car, you are simultaneously experiencing the stresses due to your real weight downward and the stresses due to your acceleration forward. So it feels like there's a somewhat extra strong gravity acting on you, not in the downward direction, not in the backward direction, but it's some angle in between, some mixture. It's a mixture of your feeling of true weight and your feeling of acceleration, the gravity-like sensation that points in the direction opposite your acceleration. Together, those become apparent weight. What you feel like is weight. And I hope that you, again, have had the experience when you're accelerating fast, rapid acceleration, maybe in an airplane taking off, for example. You're going forward for a long enough time that you can think, wow, I'm feeling extra heavy, and the direction of that extra heaviness, it's not down anymore. It's kind of down and back. Is this okay? Homework is go to the Lamborghini dealership and test drive all the cars. And you're so busy going, he said, close my eyes. Yeah. Honest officer, really. Okay, so you got the feeling of real weight. You've got the feeling of acceleration, which is always in the direction opposite your acceleration, and it's variable. It depends on how fast you're accelerating. And then you got the sum of those two experiences, which I call apparent weight. Oh, so far so good? It shouldn't come as any great surprise that if you were to accelerate forward in your Ferrari at 9.8 meters per second squared, which is just on the edge of what the car can do, because of friction issues, you're accelerating forward at 9.8 meters per second squared. That feeling of acceleration you experience in the opposite direction, your feeling of inertia, really, is indistinguishable from the conventional force of gravity, except for its direction being cockeyed, horizontal. So that you're accelerating forward at the equivalent of the acceleration due to gravity. You feel like you feel your weight. You feel the equivalent of your weight, but now horizontal. So that acceleration at 9.8 meters per second squared summons this feeling, the same feeling of acceleration you would get from your ordinary weight. And it's called a 1G acceleration. You know, have you ever heard of G's and G forces, which are used very vaguely in most contexts? You know, feeling 1G is the feeling of acceleration that comes from an acceleration that is one acceleration due to gravity in some arbitrary direction, whatever direction you're accelerating in. So if a plane accelerates forward, or a fighter jet, so the planes can accelerate, say, at 5 Gs, 5G turn. What that means is they're accelerating at about almost 50 meters per second squared, 5 times as strong as the acceleration of a falling object. And the experience to the person in the jet is a weight-like experience that's 5 times as strong as the conventional weight-like experience. Is that okay? All right. Incidentally, people can take up to about 6 Gs, I believe, is sort of as high as amusement parks are ever allowed to go. Beyond 6 Gs, people tend to pass out. Even fighter pilots have to learn, because they do turns like this, where they're in the above 6G or range, whatever. They have suits that help them, because their blood tends to go inertial and go in whatever direction they're accelerating. The blood gets left behind. And if you're accelerating up at that kind of rate, all your blood goes down into your legs, and so they learn all sorts of techniques to deal with very high G environments. So that said, context in which you accelerate and feel it, because you feel acceleration, you can't feel velocity. Velocity comes with inertia. You can't feel inertia. You can't feel your own tendency to keep going, doing what you're doing, but you can feel your body fighting not to accelerate. And so that's what you feel when you're riding in amusement park rides. And it's very hard to duplicate with you sitting on a couch. I mean, all the virtual reality you like can't get your body to viscerally feel the effect of accelerating suddenly up, down, sideways. So it's not all in your eyes and your ears. Context in which you do accelerate. When you are traveling in a carousel, just a simple carousel, and you get on the horse, and it's not one of the horses that bounces up and down. It's the boring horse that just sits there. You are traveling in a steady speed in a circle. Round and round you go. You're not speeding up and you're not slowing down as you do this, so you are certainly not accelerating forward or backward relative to your current orientation. So if you're traveling around a circle, you're not accelerating along the circle or in the line along that circle, tangent to the circle. But your velocity isn't constant, because one moment you're heading this way, another moment you're heading this way, another moment you're heading this way. So you're accelerating, but you're not speeding up or slowing down. How are you accelerating? Well, you have to be accelerating at right angles to your velocity. That's the only way in which you don't speed up or slow down. If you accelerate slightly in the direction of your velocity, you're going to speed up. If you accelerate slightly opposite your velocity, you're going to slow down. But if you accelerate exactly at right angles to your velocity, you go at constant speed. So which direction am I accelerating when I'm going steadily around a circle? It's right toward the center of the circle, what's known as a centripetal or central acceleration. There's a fancy name for toward the center. So I am accelerating toward the center of the circle, and that acceleration gets stronger as I go faster. It goes, I think, as the velocity squared, yeah. If I double my speed around the circle, I'm actually accelerating 4 times as hard. Round and round you go. So I can show you a centripetal acceleration and the need for a force to cause that centripetal acceleration. I'm going to zoom in on, and I'll see what I remember to undo this. So this is just this is a little carousel, and riding the carousel is a little pool of water. And as I make this pool of water go around in a circle at a steady speed, let me get up to speed, its inertia makes it want to go straight, but I'm forcing it to go in, so it actually, the surface of the water, you can see, is now slanted, because it needs sort of ramp-like effects to push it inward, to make it bend in that circle. It does not want to do this. You have to push it inward. And the pushing inward comes with a sloping water. You see the slope? So if that were you, you would feel flung outward. Because you're accelerating toward the center, the feeling of acceleration is opposite the direction of acceleration. You feel an outward pull, which is your own inertia trying to go straight. And the faster you go, the stronger that outward pull feels. In a context in which this happens, any of you have ridden these rotors where you're slapped against a wall as it spins around in a circle, and you try to go, your body wants to go straight, the surface behind your back on the rotor is pushing inward on you toward the center of the rotor to bend your path into a circle. Well, you're pressed very hard against that surface. And so hard that friction becomes quite strong. You can't slide up and down. You can't sort of move around. And even though they pull the floor out from under you and put you at cockeyed angles, you're just gripping. You're so much traction against that surface. You're not going to go anywhere. So, I mean, unless I guess you went in there in a Teflon suit and were super slippery, and then bad things would happen. I don't recommend it. You did not hear it from me. Okay. This is more of the same stuff. What I wanted, just given time, I'm going to go on to what I want to talk about, which is the loop. So on a roller coaster, when you go around turns, you often feel, to go around a turn, you have to accelerate toward the center of the turn more or less. Depends on whether you're speeding up or slowing down or going steady. But you're pushed toward the turn, and you feel your body flung outward. You feel this tremendous pressure. Oops, thank you. What were the odds of me forgetting? 100%. What's that? Okay. So you feel pressed toward the outside of the turn as you go around it. Super heavy. If the inward acceleration as you go around there is tremendous, three times, say, the acceleration due to gravity, you feel 3G, 3 times your weight experience outward, and you're pressed in tight your seat. If that also occurs at the bottom of a dive, when you're bending upward, not only do you feel your weight downward, but you feel a feeling of acceleration downward as you accelerate upward. But what about when you go over the lip of the hill and take a sudden dive toward the ground, or worse? In that case, the feeling of acceleration, because you're accelerating downward, the feeling of acceleration is upward. And it partially cancels your experience of weight. You feel partly weightless. And if you're diving at the full acceleration of gravity, that is, you're essentially a falling object, that upward feeling of acceleration that comes from having a downward acceleration cancels your experience of weight. You can't feel your own weight. So in free fall, you feel weightless. You actually have a weight because gravity hasn't gone away, but you can't feel it. And so drop towers allow you to feel weightless. A loop, is that okay so far? How about a loop-the-loop? A loop-the-loop goes even one step further and says, what if, instead of accelerating upward and feeling extra heavy, or accelerating downward a little bit and feeling extra light, you accelerate downward so much that you feel not just weightless, but weight like upward, inverted, weight the wrong way. And that can come about, if this is you and we drop you, you feel weightless. If this is you and we shove you toward the ground so that you're accelerating downward, you feel like gravity's pulling you upward. It's upside, it's wacky. A sharp downward acceleration makes you experience a feeling of acceleration upward, as though the world's upside down. How can we do that? Well, let me take the ball around in a circle. It doesn't want to go in a circle, it wants to go straight. That's what inertia has in mind. I'm bending its path into a loop by pulling inward with the string. I'm supplying that inward force necessary to make the ball accelerate towards my hand. So it's an acceleration toward the center. If that was you out there, you would feel a strong weight-like experience outward, away from my hand. It's not a real, there's no force. It's just your inertia trying to make you go straight. Well, that's pulling in from the outside, from the inside. How about pushing in from the outside? So now I always do it with this book because it's tradition. I'm not holding the book. I'm not gripping the book. I'm just bending its path into a loop and making it accelerate so fast over the top that it needs my help to push it into a loop. Okay? Which takes me to the last version. Good way to end here. Here's the track. Here's the car. Here's you. Okay. It's all in the starting and stopping. Woo!